For 15 years, Caleb Thornfield had perfected the art of being alone. But on this rain-soaked evening, a girl on her knees would shatter his carefully built walls in ways he never saw coming. The storm hit harder than expected, turning the dirt road into a river of mud. Caleb stood on his porch, watching lightning tear across the Texas sky. When he saw her, a figure stumbling through the downpour, barely visible through the sheets of rain. At first he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. Nobody came out here. Nobody had reason to. But there she was, collapsing to her knees right at his gate, her dress clinging to her thin frame like a second skin. Her dark hair hung in wet strands across her face, and even from 50 yards away, Caleb could see her shoulders shaking. Not from cold, from something deeper. His first instinct was to go back inside, lock the door, pretend he hadn't seen anything. That's what 15 years of isolation had taught him. People brought trouble, people brought pain, people left. But something about the way she knelt there, not moving, not calling for help, just surrendering to the storm made his chest tighten. She wasn't begging, she wasn't demanding, she was just broken. Caleb grabbed his rifle from beside the door, not to threaten, but because caution had kept him alive this long. He stepped into the rain, boots splashing through puddles as he approached the gate. The closer he got, the younger she looked. Couldn't be more than 19, maybe 20. When she finally lifted her head, her eyes met his through the darkness. They were wide, desperate, but there was something else there. Defiance. Like she was daring the world to hurt her any more than it already had. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the thunder. "I have nowhere else to go." Caleb had heard those words before. Different voice, different time, but the same desperate plea. It had ended in heartbreak then. It would probably end in heartbreak now. But as he stood there, rain soaking through his shirt, staring down at this girl who'd appeared like a ghost from his past, he realized something that terrified him more than any outlaw ever had. He was going to let her in, and he had no idea what she was running from, or what would follow her to his door. Caleb unlatched the gate with hands that hadn't trembled in years. But as the girl tried to stand, her legs gave out, sending her crashing back into the mud. That's when he saw the bruises, dark purple marks around her wrists. Like rope burns, fresh ones. Someone had tied her up, recently. Every instinct screamed at him to ask questions, but the way she flinched when he reached toward her told him everything he needed to know. She'd been hurt by someone she should have been able to trust. "Can you walk?" he asked, keeping his distance. She nodded, though her whole body shook as she struggled to her feet. Caleb noticed she favored her left leg, and there was something dark staining the hem of her dress. Blood. He led her to the porch without another word. Under the lamplight, she looked even worse. Her face was gaunt, like she hadn't eaten in days. Her lips were cracked and pale, but it was her eyes that caught him off guard. They held a hardness that didn't belong on someone so young. "What's your name?" he asked, settling into the chair across from her. "Mercy," she said quietly. "Mercy Whitfield." "Well, Mercy Whitfield, what are you running from?" Her jaw tightened. "What makes you think I'm running?" Caleb nodded toward her wrists. "Those marks. The way you keep looking over your shoulder. The fact that you're begging shelter from a stranger in the middle of nowhere. Take your pick." Mercy pulled her sleeves down, trying to hide the bruises. "Maybe I just got lost." "Maybe," Caleb said. "Or maybe someone's looking for you. Someone who won't be too happy to find out I helped you." For a moment, neither spoke. The rain continued to pound the roof, and somewhere in the distance thunder rolled across the plains. "I won't bring trouble to your door," Mercy finally said. "I just need somewhere to rest for the night. By morning I'll be gone." Caleb studied her face. He'd gotten good at reading people in his younger days. Before the isolation, this girl was lying, but not about wanting shelter. She was lying about being gone by morning. Whatever she was running from, it was bigger than just one night's refuge could fix. "You hungry?" he asked. The question seemed to surprise her. Yes." Caleb stood and walked to the door. "I'll heat up some stew. You can clean up inside." But as he reached for the door handle, Mercy's voice stopped him cold. "He said he'd find me wherever I went," she whispered. "Said there was no place on earth I could hide from him." Caleb turned back. "Who said that?" Mercy's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "My husband." The word hit Caleb like a physical blow. This wasn't just some girl running from a bad situation. This was a married woman, which meant whoever was chasing her had legal claim to her. In the eyes of the law, she was property. and helping her could make Caleb an accessory to kidnapping. But as he looked at those bruises, at the fear she was trying so hard to hide, he realized something that would change both their lives forever. He didn't care what the law said. Caleb led Mercy inside, trying to ignore how wrong this felt. His cabin had been a sanctuary for 15 years, no visitors, no complications, no reminders of the life he'd left behind. Now a married woman sat at his kitchen table, and everything he'd built was crumbling. The cabin was sparse but clean. A single bed in the corner, a stone fireplace, shelves lined with books he'd read a dozen times each. Mercy's eyes took in every detail, like she was memorizing escape routes. "There's a basin behind that curtain," Caleb said, nodding toward the back corner. "Clean clothes in the chest. They'll be too big, but they're dry." While Mercy cleaned up, Caleb heated the stew and tried to think. Helping a runaway wife was dangerous enough, but keeping her here was suicide. Men had been shot for less in these parts. But when she emerged from behind the curtain, wearing his oversized shirt and pants, something shifted in his chest. She looked impossibly young, vulnerable, like the daughter he'd never had. "How long were you married?" he asked, setting a bowl in front of her. 3 months. She took a tentative sip. Felt like 3 years. Caleb poured himself coffee, noting how she devoured the stew like she hadn't eaten in days. What kind of man was he? Mercy's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. The kind who thinks his wife is property. The kind who uses his fists when words don't work. "And you ran." "I ran." She met his eyes. Took his horse, his money, and his pride. He won't forgive that. Caleb felt a familiar anger building in his chest. The same rage that had driven him to this isolated life 15 years ago. "Good," he said quietly. The simple words seemed to shock her. "Good?" Any man who raises his hand to a woman deserves to lose everything he thinks he owns. For the first time since she'd arrived, Mercy smiled. It was small, cautious, but real. "Most people would say I should have stayed. That marriage is sacred. Most people are fools." They ate in comfortable silence after that, the storm raging outside while warmth slowly returned to Mercy's cheeks. But as the evening wore on, Caleb noticed her glancing toward the window more frequently. "He'll come looking," she said finally. "Silas doesn't give up easy." "How far behind you is he?" "Hard to say. The storm might have slowed him down. But," she shivered, despite the warmth, "he knows these parts. His family's lived here for generations." Caleb felt his blood chill. "What's his last name?" "Hartwell. Silas Hartwell." The name hit Caleb like a punch to the gut. He knew that family, knew their reputation. They owned half the county and thought they owned the other half too. Rich, powerful, and ruthless when crossed. And Caleb had just declared war on them by sheltering their runaway property. "You should have told me," he said quietly. Mercy's face went pale. "You know him?" Caleb stood and walked to the window, scanning the darkness beyond. "I know enough. And if he's coming," he turned back to her, his expression grim. "We need to be ready for anything." But even as he said it, Caleb could see the faint glow of torches moving through the trees in the distance. Silas Hartwell wasn't waiting for morning. He was already here. "Get away from the window," Caleb whispered, grabbing his rifle from the wall. The torches were getting closer. Maybe a dozen riders cutting through the rain like hunting wolves. Mercy pressed herself against the far wall, her face white with terror. He brought his brothers. And probably hired men from town. Caleb counted the lights through the darkness. She was right. This wasn't just an angry husband coming to reclaim his wife. This was a small army. "There's a root cellar under the kitchen," he said, pulling up a loose floorboard. "Get down there and don't make a sound no matter what you hear." "What about you?" "I'm going to have a conversation with your husband." Mercy grabbed his arm. "He'll kill you. Silas doesn't negotiate." Caleb looked down at her hand on his sleeve, then met her eyes. "Neither do I." The sound of hoofbeats grew louder as Mercy disappeared into the cellar. Caleb replaced the floorboard and positioned himself by the door, rifle ready. Through the window he could see the riders forming a semicircle around his cabin. A voice boomed through the storm. "Thornfield, we know she's in there." Caleb opened the door slowly, keeping the rifle visible but not aimed. The man on the lead horse was everything Mercy had implied. Young, maybe 25, with the soft face of someone who'd never known real hardship. But his eyes held the cold cruelty of a man who enjoyed causing pain. "Silas Hartwell, I presume," Caleb said. "That's right. And you're harboring my wife." Silas nudged his horse closer, water dripping from his hat. "Hand her over, and we'll pretend this never happened." Caleb glanced at the other riders. Some were Hartwell family. He recognized the resemblance. Others were clearly hired guns, the kind of men who killed for money and asked no questions. "Don't see any wife here," Caleb said calmly. Silas's jaw tightened. "Don't play games with me, old man. That horse tied behind your barn? That's my horse. Those tracks leading to your door? Those are her boots." Caleb had missed the tracks. Sloppy. 15 years of isolation had made him careless. "Maybe someone borrowed your horse," he said. "Happens all the time out here." One of the hired guns laughed. "He's got spine. I'll give him that." Silas raised his hand for silence. "Mr. Thornfield, I'm going to ask you one more time. Where is my wife? If you were Caleb, what would you do? Hand over an innocent woman to save your own life, or stand your ground knowing it might be your last stand? Tell me in the comments. I need to know which side you'd choose. Because what Caleb decided next would determine whether either of them saw morning. Your wife," Caleb said slowly, "ran away from you for a reason. And looking at the company you keep, I'm starting to understand why." The insult hung in the air like gunpowder. Several of the riders shifted in their saddles, hands moving toward their weapons. Silas's face darkened. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Wouldn't be the first time." The standoff stretched like a taut wire. 12 armed men against one isolated rancher. The smart play was to surrender. The safe play was to hand over mercy and hope they rode away. But as Caleb stood there in the rain, staring into the eyes of a man who beat women, he remembered why he'd come to this place 15 years ago. Some things were worth dying for. "Boys," Silas said quietly, "search the cabin." That's when Caleb made his choice. He raised the rifle and aimed it directly at Silas's chest. "First man who steps foot on my porch dies." The click of a dozen hammers being pulled back echoed through the rain. Every gun in the semicircle was now pointed at Caleb's chest, but his rifle never wavered from Silas. "You're outnumbered 12-1, Silas said, his voice steady despite the barrel aimed at his heart. "Even if you kill me, my brothers will put you in the ground." "Maybe," Caleb said, "but you'll be too dead to enjoy it." For a moment, nobody moved. The rain continued to fall, and somewhere in the distance, lightning illuminated the standoff like a photographer's flash. Then Silas smiled. It was the cold, calculating smile of a man who'd found his opponent's weakness. "You know what I think?" Silas said, dismounting slowly. "I think you're sweet on my little wife. Old bachelor like you probably haven't seen a woman in years." She bat her eyelashes. "Tell you some sob story about mean old Silas?" Caleb's finger tightened on the trigger. "Shut your mouth. She's good at that, playing the victim. But what she didn't tell you is that she killed my baby." Silas took a step closer, ignoring the rifle. 3 months married, and she threw herself down a flight of stairs to get rid of my child." The words hit Caleb like physical blows. In the cellar below, he could hear Mercy's sharp intake of breath through the floorboards. "That's why she ran," Silas continued. "Not because I hit her. Because she knew what she'd done was murder, and she couldn't live with the guilt." Caleb's resolve wavered for just a moment. Was any of it true? Had Mercy lied to him about everything? But then he remembered the rope burns on her wrists, the way she'd flinched when he reached toward her, the terror in her eyes when she'd spoken Silas's name. "Even if that's true," Caleb said quietly, "it doesn't give you the right to tie her up like an animal." Silas's smile faltered. "She told you about that?" "Saw the marks myself. Fresh ones. She was trying to run away. I had to restrain her for her own good." "Her own good." Caleb repeated the words like they tasted bitter. "Just like beating her was for her own good?" "I never—" Silas caught himself, but it was too late. The admission hung in the air between them. One of the hired guns shifted uncomfortably. "Boss, maybe we should just—" "Shut up," Silas snapped. Then to Caleb, "She's my wife. What I do with her is my business." "Not anymore." Silas's face contorted with rage. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. My family owns this county. The sheriff, the judge, half the businesses in town. You think anyone's going to believe your word against mine?" "Don't need anyone to believe anything," Caleb said. "Just need to make sure you never touch her again." That's when Silas pulled his own gun. The movement was fast, but Caleb was faster. 15 years of isolation hadn't dulled his reflexes as much as he'd thought. His rifle barked once, and Silas stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder. Chaos erupted. Horses reared as their riders tried to get clear shots without hitting each other. Caleb dove behind his porch railing as bullets splintered the wood around him, but in the confusion, he heard something that made his blood run cold. Mercy screamed from inside the cabin. Someone had found the cellar. If you're enjoying the story, subscribe to the channel. Caleb rolled toward the cabin door as bullets whined overhead. Through the doorway, he could see one of the Hartwell brothers dragging Mercy up from the cellar, his hand clamped over her mouth. The man was younger than Silas, maybe 22, with the same cruel eyes. "Got her!" he yelled to the others. Caleb had seconds to act. Outside, Silas was barking orders through gritted teeth, his shoulder bleeding freely. "Kill him! Kill the old fool!" But the other riders hesitated. Killing a man for harboring a runaway wife was one thing. Murdering him in cold blood while he was trying to protect a woman was another. Even hired guns had limits. Caleb used their hesitation to his advantage. He burst through the doorway, tackling the brother holding Mercy. They crashed into the kitchen table, sending dishes flying. The young man was strong, but Caleb had 15 years of hard ranch work in his muscles. He drove his fist into the kid's temple and the brother went limp. "Are you hurt?" Caleb asked Mercy quickly. She shook her head, but her eyes were wide with terror. "He found the entrance while you were talking. I tried to stay quiet, but not your fault." Caleb grabbed ammunition from his gun cabinet. "Can you shoot?" "My father taught me." He handed her a pistol. "Good, because this isn't over." Outside, Silas's voice had turned desperate. "Burn him out! Burn the whole place down!" Through the window, Caleb could see two of the riders dismounting with torches. The rain was letting up, which meant the fire might actually catch. "Back door," Caleb said urgently. "There's a path through the woods that leads to the creek. Follow it downstream until you reach the old bridge. Then, I'm not leaving you." Caleb stared at her. In the space of a few hours, this girl had shown more loyalty than most people he'd known in a lifetime. "Mercy, they want you. If you're not here, they have no reason to kill me. You think Silas will just let you live after you shot him?" She gripped the pistol tighter. "He'll tell everyone you kidnapped me, that you forced yourself on me. Your reputation will be destroyed." She was right. Silas had the power and connections to make Caleb's life hell, even if he survived the night. "Then what do you suggest?" he asked. "We fight." The simple declaration caught him off guard. "2 of us against 11? You got any better ideas?" Before Caleb could answer, flames began licking at the cabin's front wall. The hired guns had thrown their torches against the wooden siding, and despite the rain, the fire was starting to spread. "They're really going to burn us alive," Mercy whispered. Caleb checked his rifle. 3 shots left. He looked around the cabin, calculating angles and distances. The back window offered some protection, but they'd be sitting ducks if they stayed inside. "There's something you should know," Mercy said suddenly. "About the baby Silas mentioned." Caleb met her eyes. "Now's not the time. He's lying." Her voice was steady despite the chaos outside. "There was no baby. I never—" She took a shaky breath. "I couldn't give him children because of what he did to me. The doctor said the damage was too severe." The admission hit Caleb harder than any bullet. This girl had suffered things no person should endure, and still she was standing here ready to fight beside him. "Mercy," he said quietly, "I know what you're thinking. That I'm damaged goods. That no decent man would want—" "I'm thinking," Caleb interrupted, "that you're the bravest person I've ever met." The flames reached the roof, and smoke began filling the cabin. Outside, Silas was shouting orders, his voice growing stronger despite his wound. Caleb made his decision. "If we're going to do this," he said, "we do it together." Smoke filled the cabin as Caleb kicked out the back window. "Stay low," he told Mercy, helping her through the opening. They dropped into the mud behind the cabin, the fire crackling above them. The hired guns were positioned around the front and sides, but they'd left the back relatively unguarded. Arrogance, Caleb thought. They assumed a cornered man would try to negotiate, not fight his way out. "The barn," Caleb whispered, pointing to the structure 50 yards away. "Better cover, and my horse is there." They crawled through the mud, using the storm and darkness as cover. Behind them, the cabin roof burst into flames, lighting up the night like a funeral pyre. "There," one of the riders shouted. "Behind the cabin." Bullets began whining around them as they sprinted for the barn. Caleb felt one tug at his sleeve, another kick up dirt near his boots. But they made it, diving through the barn door as lead splinters flew from the wooden frame. Inside, Caleb's stallion Thunder snorted nervously at the gunfire. The horse was old but steady, a veteran of Caleb's younger, wilder days. "Can you ride?" Caleb asked Mercy. "Better than I can shoot." "Good, because we're going to need both." Caleb began saddling Thunder with practiced efficiency. There's a trail through the canyon that leads to the next county. If we can reach it, the barn door exploded inward as 3 of the hired guns rushed in, guns blazing. Caleb dove behind a hay bale, returning fire. One of the men screamed and went down, but the other 2 kept coming. Mercy's pistol barked twice. Clean shots, both of them. The remaining attackers crumpled to the barn floor. Caleb stared at her in amazement. "Your father taught you well. He said a woman needed to be able to protect herself." Her hands shook as she reloaded. "Wish he'd taught me how to pick better husbands." Outside, Silas was screaming orders. "Burn the barn too, don't let them escape." But his men were hesitating. 3 of their number lay dead or wounded, and the easy money they'd been promised was turning into a bloodbath. "I'm not dying for your wife troubles," one of them called out. "This is between you and him." "Cowards," Silas raged. "I'll double your pay." "Keep your money," another voice replied. "We're done." The sound of horses departing filled the night. Within minutes, only Silas and his brothers remained. Caleb peered through a crack in the barn wall. 3 men left, but they were the most dangerous ones. Family, they wouldn't abandon the fight. "We can still run," Mercy said. "Take Thunder and head for the canyon." Caleb considered it. They might make it. The horse was fast, and the remaining Hartwells were on foot now, having sent their horses away with the departing hired guns. But running meant Silas would follow. Today, tomorrow, next week, he'd never stop hunting Mercy, and he'd make Caleb's life a living hell in the process. "No more running," Caleb said quietly. "This ends tonight." He stepped out of the barn, rifle ready. In the flickering light of the burning cabin, he could see Silas and his 2 brothers taking cover behind an overturned wagon. "Silas!" Caleb called out. "Just you and me. Leave your brothers out of this." "You shot me, you old fool," Silas shouted back. "You think I'm going to give you a fair fight? I think you're a coward who hides behind hired guns and family money." The insult did what Caleb hoped it would. Silas stood up from behind the wagon, his wounded arm hanging uselessly at his side. "I'm going to kill you slow," Silas snarled. "Make you watch while I drag her back home. Teach her what happens to wives who run." That's when Mercy stepped out of the barn beside Caleb, her pistol steady in her hands. "I'm done being afraid of you," she said. The final confrontation happened in the space between heartbeats. Silas raised his gun with his good arm, his brothers flanking him on either side. But 15 years of isolation hadn't dulled Caleb's aim as much as he'd feared. His rifle spoke first, and the brother on the left spun and fell. Mercy's pistol cracked twice in rapid succession, and the second brother clutched his chest, staggering backward. That left only Silas, wounded and alone, standing in the mud between the burning cabin and the barn. His gun wavered as he tried to aim with his offhand. "It's over, Silas," Caleb said, keeping his rifle trained on the younger man. "Your hired guns are gone. Your brothers are down. Walk away." "She's my wife!" Silas screamed, spittle flying from his lips. "She belongs to me. I don't belong to anyone," Mercy said quietly. "Not anymore." Silas's face contorted with rage and disbelief. "You think you can just leave? Start over somewhere else? I'll find you. I'll always find you." "No," Mercy said, stepping forward. "You won't." She fired once. Clean. Final. Silas Hartwell crumpled to the ground, his threats dying with him in the Texas mud. For a long moment, neither Caleb nor Mercy moved. The only sounds were the crackling of the burning cabin and the distant rumble of thunder as the storm moved away. "Is it really over?" Mercy whispered. Caleb looked around at the carnage. 3 dead men, a burned cabin, a life's work reduced to ashes. But somehow, standing there in the ruins of his solitary existence, he felt more alive than he had in 15 years. "It's over," he said. They buried the bodies at dawn, saying no words over the graves. The dead had made their choices, and so had the living. The cabin was a total loss, but the barn had survived, along with most of Caleb's livestock. Insurance money would rebuild what the fire had destroyed, though it would take time. "Where will you go?" Caleb asked as they prepared to leave for town. Mercy looked at him with those eyes that had seen too much but still held hope. "I was thinking maybe I'd stay. Help you rebuild, if you'll have me." Caleb felt something loosen in his chest, a knot that had been there for 15 years. "I'm not an easy man to live with, set in my ways, suspicious of people. Good thing I'm not people then." She smiled, and it was like sunrise after the longest night. "I'm just Mercy, just Mercy," he repeated, and for the first time in decades, he smiled back. If you're enjoying the story, subscribe to the channel. 3 months later, the new cabin was finished. Bigger than the old one, with 2 bedrooms and a proper kitchen. Mercy had insisted on the extra space, claiming a person never knew when they might need room for guests. Caleb had learned to trust her judgment about such things. She'd kept her maiden name when they married, wanting nothing that connected her to her past life. The townspeople whispered about the quick courtship, but the sheriff had ruled the shootout self-defense, and the Hartwell family's reputation for cruelty made most folks sympathetic to the couple's story. On quiet evenings, when the work was done, and they sat on their new porch watching the sunset, Caleb sometimes thought about the girl who'd appeared at his gate that stormy night. Broken, desperate, running from a life she couldn't escape. That girl was gone now, replaced by a woman who'd found her strength in the fire and never looked back. "What are you thinking about?" Mercy would ask, catching his distant expression. "Nothing important," he'd always answer. "Just grateful for storms." She'd laugh then, and the sound would carry across the plains like a promise that some things, once lost, could be found again. Now click on the video on the screen to hear a story even better than this one, with a twist so powerful